Hello, Katee. A warm welcome to you today on our podcast, Master AI Disruption. How are you? Of
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me, Francis.
course, my pleasure. And you're calling us from Phoenix, Arizona.
Yes.
A pleasure. I like this state a lot. It's a beautiful state and a great city. So, why don't we start with, where you at? So I know you are the president and founder of VH Included, a consulting firm focused on HR and transformation. So tell us more. What got you here? And then you'll tell us about your company as well.
Sounds good. So, again, my name is Katee Van Horn. I'm an HR executive, speaker, advisor, and the founder of VH Included. I've spent my career really helping organizations grow, scale, and build stronger cultures. And that includes leading global HR teams across more than 50 countries, supporting companies through major moments of change like IPO readiness, M&A, global expansion, leadership development, HR transformation, and of course, now, with AI and the disruption that AI is creating. But I've held leadership roles in companies like GoDaddy, WebPros, ChargeNet Stations, and I also co-host a podcast with one of my dear friends called the Inclusive AF Podcast. And we talk about leadership, inclusion, workplace culture, and the future of work. And really right now, my focus as, most HR executives is really on that practical side of HR. So not just the hype, not just the, what's the cool new thing or whatever flavor of the month, whatever you want to call it, but how do we make responsible decisions about AI to improve the team member experience, reduce friction in how we do work and how managers get things done?
Mhm.
So, really putting AI in the levers of what we can do to have HR become more strategic and
Mhm.
more connected to the business.
Okay, wonderful. All right. And what kind of clients do you have? Typically, what's your ICP at VH included?
So I have worked with a lot of different companies, as I mentioned, some global companies that are spread out throughout the entire world. And then I also work with local nonprofits. So kind of I've run the gamut of, nonprofit to multi-billion dollar companies that I've been able to support, which has been very fun and obviously challenging at
Mhm.
times, but also very rewarding.
Okay, wonderful. So, if you allow me, I would like to dive a little bit more about AI and what kind of trend do you see happening today. It's
Yeah.
been in the conversation really for, in the vernacular for less than 2 years, really,
Hmm.
right? Even
Yeah.
if AI has been around for 70 years, but in terms of us, in business at the helm of executive roles. So tell us what you see.
Yeah, so I'll put on the lens of HR, but then I'll also expand it a little bit into what I'm seeing kind of across the business. So, from an HR perspective, as you mentioned, Francis, there's been a lot of hype and a lot of noise around AI. And, people are talking about AI without really knowing what it means, unfortunately, at times. And so, for me, what I'm seeing is the trend of how do we actually make this real? And something that's applicable and legal and compliant and all those, wonderful things that HR has to make sure of. But how do we make this work and this, idea of people coming to work more seamless? And I think that's really HR's role in a lot of ways is how do we make the experience for the employees or the team members more seamless so that they can focus on the day-to-day business that they need to achieve so
Mhm.
that they aren't worrying about, hey, how do I find out how much time off I can take or how do I make sure I have the right benefits or whatever. It's really about thinking about what are those things that our employees need, making it as seamless and as easy as possible to get that done for them so that they can focus on the business at hand. And then, across the business, I think like a lot of organizations, we're seeing some shifts in how people approach, and I'll use engineering as an example, how they approach engineering and writing code. And how do we make sure that, again, we're still doing the right things and having that human touch? Because I think that's the critical piece that people are maybe resisting. We're seeing this approach to AI of AI is going to solve everything and AI is going to do everything. And unfortunately, we absolutely need that human touch and that human oversight
Mhm.
to make AI another lever we can pull to
Mhm.
drive the business forward and to drive work forward and to get more done, of course.
Yeah, sure, sure. Interesting. Yes. And then what about human adaptation to AI? What do you see in this respect?
The lack of, you mean? Or no, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and especially for HR executives and HR generally. We have to help people learn how to adapt to what it means to be whatever their role is in this new future of work. Where for the longest time it was, the be all end all was this is how we're going to do work. And now with AI being introduced, everyone's role is shifting. And the role that people do today isn't going to be the same role in 6 months or a year or more than that.
Yeah.
And I would say 6 months, really, at best, that most organizations are looking at that it's how do we adapt? How do we make this better? But one of the things, and this actually came out of a conference that I listened in on, and it from Hacking HR, which was really about, go and rewrite your job description using AI. And with the idea that AI is the frame that you're working under. And just that change in mindset to say, what will my role look like as a chief people officer, as, an HR person, as an engineer, as a whatever, how is AI going to impact my role? And I think that's something that we can't do one time and then go, okay, well, here's my new role. We have to continue to do that. And
Mm.
so it's really helping people to understand that it maybe isn't your job's going away or you're going to get laid off or you're going to get fired or whatever, but it is how do I evolve as a human so that I can move into this new way of working and this new way of thinking about getting my work done?
Sure, sure. And also a lot of unpredictability, right? A lot of
100%.
unknown.
Yes.
And therefore, another mindset, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's the toughest part is that all of us like to resist change and, myself included. Change is scary,
Yes.
change is hard. And so being able to step back and go, what am I trying to achieve? I think we've all heard from some people in our own organizations or kind of on LinkedIn or wherever else you might, consume different things about work that, oh, I'm not going to use AI. I refuse to use AI. And it's like, well, that's like saying I'm not going to use the internet, like it's just not a possibility and it's not something that we can do. So it is, how do we adapt ourselves and how do we think about the work we do and change that mindset, but make it less scary that again, it's not your job or you are going away, but
Mhm.
how do I evolve and do something differently?
And so, Kelly, what do you see happen for, your league, like HR consultants, for instance, and or HR executives, because you work with them or you've been one of them and you are
Yes.
one of them today too. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so what I want to tell us a little bit, what you see. Yeah.
I think, the biggest thing is what we just talked about is that resistance to change and that, having to really walk people through the fear and change management, I guess is what I would really call it is, and I think anyone who's been in HR for any length of time, that's a key component of your role is
Yeah.
helping people to manage change.
Yeah.
But I also think it's a matter of, as an HR executive, how am I framing this in the organization to make it less scary? How am I making sure that people understand that this is a positive thing and we will get more done and, maybe with less hours or, you'll be able to explore things that you haven't explored before or learn new skill sets.
Mm,
And I think
mm,
that's the part that's fun is that, look at what you can learn by going and playing in Claude or playing in whatever, AI or LLM that you're in. What are you able to learn and what are you able to take away
mm.
that you can then use in your life outside of work as well?
Mhm. So you work for GoDaddy and other big players. One of the big player today is Oracle, and you know what happened? 22,000, and they say, well, it might be just the beginning, or it just not be the end, rather. So have you found yourself in a situation like this and one of those big guys, either on the client side, as a consultant, sorry, or on the client side?
Yeah. I think that a lot of organizations are going to see a shift in how they approach workforce planning and what the needs are of the organization.
Mhm.
So it might be that there's a layoff today, but we've also seen some of these big players pull people back in because they weren't ready or they didn't have the tools in place or the AI wasn't where they thought it was in terms of what they needed to get done.
Mm.
So I think we're going to see an evolution that, as you just said, like it's constantly changing and it's constantly updating. So we don't know that unpredictability is going to continue. And so it is I think my advice is always, hey, cautiously optimistic, but being cautious in how we approach this work. So, if there is going to be a reduction of headcount, being very thoughtful about what that means and where that work goes. Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of times people jump to that cost savings versus going, okay, but how does the work actually get done?
Yeah.
And if the AI isn't there yet, then it's not gonna get done, and then you're in a different
Yeah.
issue. You have different issues at that
Yeah.
point, but I do think there will be some cuts and there will be some reductions for different organizations, which we're already seeing. But I think the biggest piece and the advice I give to team members is start to look at your role and how your role should evolve so that
Mhm.
you can be ahead of the curve and you can be ahead of the challenges that are coming.
Yeah, yeah. I spoke to the CEO of a private equity owned company, tech, and he was saying like, the only message is really, if you live here, you'll face AI. I mean, unless you really retire or you go
Yep.
into another. So learn it here, regardless of whether you know where it's taking us, because I cannot ensure anything because we depend on private equity. So live with it because it's your chance here. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like I advise people of that, AI or other any type
Yeah.
of learning. It's learn as much as you can while you're on the job, get
Yeah.
the experiences, raise your hand when something comes up. Actually, at one of the groups that I've recently worked with, they asked folks like who wants to be kind of a first tester of some of these AI tools. And we
Yeah.
had quite a few people raise their hands and quite a few people went, no, 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 it's not for me. And those folks that jumped on board and are now much more advanced and
Ahead.
down the path are in a much better spot.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing is we have to embrace this, even though it's scary because there is so much unknown. You have to embrace it to be able to be successful in the future. And like you
Yeah.
said, unless you're planning on retiring, this is where we're going. And so we have to be aware of it and we have to embrace it.
Yeah, this is where we are. Yeah,
Yes,
stuff. Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. And so you were saying the biggest difficulties are adaptation, right? What have you seen work at some of your clients or employers, personally, in terms of encouraging this adaptation piece?
I think letting people play. There are so many organizations that I think if someone makes a mistake or if someone does something wrong, the first instinct is to punish or, in some ways scold people. But we have to let people play with these tools so they can figure out like, we want people to break stuff. We want people, obviously carefully. You don't want confidential information getting out into the interwebs, but it's also, you want people to test it and test what the boundaries are, see what it can do, and also see what the limitations are.
Hmm.
So, again, with that example of writing code, I was just on a Slack channel with a group and, they were talking about, hey, we've been testing this to see what this can, what code it can actually write. And yes, there still needs to be that human touch. And I think that's the piece that we can reassure people of is that people aren't going away because we still need that human touch. It's kind of like when some of the things came up with bias in the very first kind of round of AI and some of the very first ways that AI was moved, with resume parsing and things like that. And we know that if someone a human is touching it at any point in time, there is ways for bias to be introduced based on how we write the prompt or
Sure,
write
yeah,
whatever.
sure.
And so we have to be aware of that, but we have to have a human on the other side of it to say, hey, this looks wonky and why is it doing this? And to understand and analyze what the outcome is and what that impact actually could be.
Yeah, understood. Understood. And so tell us a success story that you've seen happen in this respect.
Yeah. So most recently at WebPros, we've had quite a few successes with what we've done with some of the AI tools for HR. So we've built out some chatbots that have been able to, we WebPros is in 51 countries. And so we have questions that come up of, hey, in my country, what's the policy for XYZ? And, being able to answer those questions without having to have someone available 24/7 to be able to answer just the most basic questions, but also with some of our job postings, with some of the resume parsing, with some of the different work that we're doing on the back end for recruiting and talent acquisition. It's been really great. We know we have, hundreds of applications to every single role and to be able to go through and say, show me the 4 or 5 top candidates and please make sure you're, thinking about GDPR, you're thinking about some of these other confidentiality pieces, et cetera, how data is being used, letting the candidates know how the data is being used, making sure that you're really being thoughtful about that. But we've seen some success to be able to say, hey, this actually works. And we are getting what we need. And the way the job postings are being written is slightly different. And so we're getting the right candidates
Mhm.
applying versus just anyone who sees a keyword that they go, this must be the job for me. But we're getting the right candidates applying, which is great.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, wonderful. Congratulations. And then from there you showcase and then people adopt more and yeah, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, on the candidate side, because I know a lot of people are in the market right now, being able to use whatever AI tool of choice you have to be able to update resumes, to be able to look at, here's a job posting. Do I actually have the right qualifications? And
Mm,
how do I highlight those qualifications? And I caution people not to go in and go, hey, write my resume so it, hits all the keywords. That's not what it's about. It's about saying, here's my experience, here's what I've done. How can I highlight that to show up for a recruiter or for whoever is reviewing the resumes? And make sure that you're highlighting the right things on your resume that you've done, not making anything up on your
sure,
resume,
sure,
of
sure,
course,
sure, sure.
but making sure that you do rise to the top in that applicant pool.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, anything else that I should have asked you about what you do and that I've not thought of?
I think those are the biggies. I think that the biggest piece that, the advice that I give to people that I'll continue to give to people is just what I said earlier. Go play with the tools, go play with it on your own to do any number of things. Even if it's, hey, create a grocery list based on what I want to eat this week or whatever, just to see what it can do. Cause I think it's really fun
Yeah,
to be able to see how does the brain work on these different LLMs? How does this work to say what can it actually do for me? And then from there, it becomes a little bit more comfortable and less scary to
sure.
apply it to your role.
Yeah, yeah,
And as I said at the beginning of this, rewrite your job description with the idea of AI being front of mind and kind of AI first.
yeah,
That will shift the way you're thinking about your job as well.
sure. And where you create value and where you can focus, your priorities. Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
So you could
100%.
just
Absolutely. Exactly. Exactly.
well, Kelly, thank you so very much. I hope we'll stay in touch and maybe in 1 year, to see where you're at in this journey of HR and AI. But you've been
Yes.
very insightful to me and to our audience. So very grateful for this. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Francis. Take care.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yes.